And I want to go ahead and address something else here as well, and it's guilt by association. Whether it's voluntary association or not, as an American, I might feel a little bit of guilt because of what the Americans are doing in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the fact that we're supporting the Israeli occupation of Palestine. So most Americans, if they're aware of these basic facts, just these simple facts, that there are a lot of atrocities taking place at the hands of American soldiers in these foreign lands that we have no business being in, of course, then most Americans are going to feel a sense of guilt. Why? Because most people are good people, whites and non-whites alike. So when I sit here and I speak about immigration, and it's anti-immigration, I'm not anti-immigrants. I don't want anything to happen bad to anybody. We all deserve the right for freedom and self-governance. It boils down to that. Separate but equally free in our own land. Why should blacks have whites governing them? Why should whites have blacks governing them? Or, in the instance of reality, why should any of us have Jews governing all of our lives? We shouldn't. We all have the right to freedom and self-governance. You cannot mix people together and expect them to violate the very laws of nature, to dismiss the things that bond them with their people. We all have a natural tendency to prefer, be that white athletes, white politicians, or black athletes, black politicians, black musicians, whoever it may be. If you're black and you're voting for something, a talent contest or whatever it may be, you're going to root for, or at least identify with, those who are most like you. This is natural. This is something that we have to want to reject. We have to have a mountain of false guilt forced upon us for us to ignore these natural tendencies. There's nothing hateful or evil and racist about this. This is natural. We all have the right for freedom and self-governance. But my point about this guilt by association, when I start speaking of immigrants, then I know a lot of people. Most of my friends are immigrants, right? Most of the people that I grew up with are non-whites. So a lot of people would tell me, and I don't need to hear this, but a lot of people would automatically tell me, well, Scott, as a white person or whoever they may be, I know a lot of immigrants who bring something to this economy, who had a particular skill. They were doctors back in their country and so on and so forth. Well, most were not. Sorry to tell you this. Most non-whites who are being forced into white nations at this point in time are not skilled laborers. Most of them are living off the welfare system, which is obviously predominantly being funded by whites, stolen from whites, taken from whites by the Jews, bringing these non-whites into this country with a clear agenda in mind. They're not doing this because it is the best thing for our economy or our collective good. They are doing this to destroy us. Again, comparing in contrast their policies in Israel with the Jewish policies in all Western nations, their immigration policies that they are forcing these non-white immigrants upon us. Again, they expose themselves. So there's going to be a natural tendency when people whom I respect and have always had a mutual respect, when they hear me saying things like this, they feel guilty in a sense. They don't want to have any blanket condemnations or what sounds like a blanket condemnation. When they hear someone speaking against immigration, they think automatically that this is a white perspective, almost a white supremacist perspective, that we're better and that we feel that we have to have everything. No. It's freedom and self-governance. It is as simple as that. It always boils down to that. Any nationalist, black nationalist, white nationalist, whoever it may be, if they are going to speak in an intelligent manner, if they want to be heard, if they want to succeed in their goals, that should be the basic premise of their message. Freedom and self-governance. You cannot argue against a person when they're coming at you from that position. What can you tell them? That they don't deserve freedom? That they have no right to it? That they cannot govern themselves? Of course not. But that's ultimately what this is about. And we're going to deal with the facts, whether it's pleasant or not. Whether you have personal quagmires in your life, such as I have, right? Since all of my friends are non-white, and here I am speaking against non-white immigration, or whatever it may be. The truth stands alone. And if we can't do that, and if we can't recognize our own role or our collective role. Again, I didn't choose to be American. I was born an American. I didn't choose to be white. I was born white. So if there are white Americans over in Iraq doing evil deeds, I'm going to talk about it. I am going to let them know and let the whole entire world know that they are wrong for what they are doing. We all need to be held accountable. If someone else is out there saying, well, these white Americans, or mostly white Americans, are over here in Iraq killing people, I'm not going to automatically take the white American side simply because I'm a white American. I will admit where white Americans are wrong. all the way to the end without a doubt. I'm not guilty along with them simply because I happen to be white and I happen to be American as well, but I'm not going to give them a free pass. However, on the flip side of this, most people who are immigrants or simply non-white would in fact get, or still in fact get, defensive. Even people who are in the know, even people who have had a working relationship, mutual respect for a very long time now when it comes to exposing Jews, they just don't like it when someone such as myself or anyone speaks about immigration or non-whites, because they feel they have to come to their defense. They feel that this is an attack on them. No, I'm just speaking to the reality of the world in which we live in. I'm speaking to the reality of the intent that these Jews have by bringing these non-white immigrants into white nations. I'm not condemning them collectively or individually, not at all. And I will sit here and admit, be the first to admit, sure, there are some of them who are highly skilled laborers. Sure, there are some of them who are more intelligent than I will ever hope to be. And they bring something positive to our collective good, our economy, whatever reasons you may believe that they've been brought here. But in the end, you cannot deny that most of them, the vast majority of them, are not being brought here because of their skills. They couldn't even excel in their own country. These are the bottom of the pit being brought to our country for the most part, the vast majority of them, with very few exceptions. They are the ones being brought to our country, having no right to be here, having no need to be here, not even as political exiles, that their lives are in jeopardy. Whereas we'll have people from South Africa, white farmers and whites who do have skills, that they could bring something to the table, being rejected. They are not allowed, and I know several South Africans who would love to leave South Africa because there is a genocide going on in that country. Of course, you don't hear about it in Jew media, which only highlights their collective intent, the cover-up of what's going on. And then they're not allowing these whites who do have skills, who would like to leave in the interest of saving their own life, right? They have just as much right as the Cubans had for wanting to leave Cuba, if not more, because they are being deliberately targeted because of their race. But they're not being allowed to come to this country, the United States, or the countries that their forefathers, their ancestors, were originally from in Europe. They're being forced to stay in a place where genocide is taking place, but again, a genocide, a quiet genocide that no one knows about or no one hears about in the mainstream media. But my point here in that is they are not allowed to come, yet the whole rest of the third world is being brought. They're being given incentives, a free house, free utilities, free food, a free ride to come to our countries. And then, of course, like I pointed out in the video earlier, they're taught to hate us. This is all meant, number one, as a distraction, of course, because as I pointed out before, if the population of Germany is 99% German and 1% Jewish, when everything starts falling apart, as it inevitably will, because a parasite can only bleed a host for so long, eventually things are going to start falling apart. When that happens, you know what? The average German is going to realize, wait a minute, all the media is owned by this 1%. All of the money, the printing presses, is being controlled by this 1%. Wait, what are these 1%? This 1% is Jewish. So they are going to act in the interest of their own survival. And they are going to do something about this Jewish problem, a Jewish problem that has occurred throughout history. And then what's going to happen? They're going to want to expel the Jews, just as the Germans tried to do. They didn't want to exterminate them, they wanted to expel them. Why? Because it comes back to the basic premise of freedom and self-governance. Who wants to willingly be a slave? Who wants to willingly subject themselves to a life of slavery, of bondage, of not having any freedom, of not being able to do anything in your own best interests? The answer is clear and the answer is obvious. So when I speak against the illegal occupation in Palestine, or when I speak about the American role in supporting that, or the European, the white role in supporting that, because let's be frank here, that's what it all boils down to. And if I speak about the white involvement, the white soldiers who are involved in committing atrocities in Iraq and Afghanistan, and possibly Iran in the future, and it's been various other places as well, against each other, mind you, of course, in World War I and World War II, and throughout history, most of the deaths have been white deaths, whites causing the deaths of other at the behest and through the orders, taking the orders of the Jews. Jews profiting on both sides of nearly every war. I can't think of an example where they didn't. If someone else can, please fill me in. Let me know. Prove it with some facts, right? Don't just call me an anti-Semitic. Prove it. Prove that there was no Jewish role in the white-on-white, the brother wars that have taken place throughout history. But nonetheless, what that's basically admitting is that whites have been pawns. They have been tools against each other, and in more recent times, against others. They have been tools, the same way that non-whites are being used as tools, as pawns against whites. We have to recognize both sides. Just as we have to speak against the genocide that's taking place in Palestine, we have to speak against the genocide that is taking place worldwide against whites in every white nation. And I have a hard time even claiming that these are white nations anymore. I should say former white nations, because the percentage of whites is sharply on the decline. Soon enough, it won't be long, we're talking about tens of thousands of years where these countries or these lands were entirely white, suddenly becoming minority white population all the way down to oblivion in a very short period of time. You're talking about 100 years, just several decades. Just several decades, whites are going to go from being the majority population, as they should be in white nations, down to the minority. And then, I mean, where does it go from there? Where does it go from there? With a population of people who have been taught to hate whites, blame whites for everything that's gone wrong in their life, both past and present and into the future, what do you think they're going to do? Do you think that they're going to give us a free ride? Do you think that they're going to treat us as kindly as we have treated them? Of course not. They weren't programmed to. So it's a very grim future indeed. And if whites can accept their role, the way that they've been fooled into doing things against each other and against others, then non-whites also need to accept this responsibility as well. And I'm speaking to people who are already Jew-wise, who just simply reject these inconvenient truths because it doesn't suit their interest, their worldview, or again, they feel guilty by association. So they will not speak freely, openly, and truthfully on these things, avoiding the topic or rejecting a person such as myself entirely. Doesn't matter if I've spoken their interest at length. Doesn't matter. When I start speaking about things that they don't like and they feel guilty, because again, most people, especially people that we know in this movement who are trying to speak against the atrocities that the Jews are committing against us all, they're good-natured, they're empathetic, they're kind. They don't want to be associated with anything evil, with anything that's wrong. Just like I don't want to be associated with these white American soldiers who are over there raping and plundering and killing these people in their own land. But I'm going to speak the truth about it. I'm going to hold these people accountable. Whether they're white, whether they're non-white, whatever end of this they are on. If they're guilty, knowingly or not, they need to be called out. We need to discuss these things openly. How else can we stop what the Jews are doing if we don't even recognize our roles collectively or as individuals in this agenda, in carrying this agenda out? Without whites on one side or without non-whites on the other acting against each other, the Jews would be out of business. If we simply knew the truth, the entire truth, then we can get somewhere. But as long as people are out there still holding back, still just don't want to be inconvenienced by these truths, this guilt by association, whatever their personal attachment to these things may be, we're not going to get anywhere. The Jews know that. They prey upon, they depend upon our being empathetic people, kind people. We don't want to be associated with anything that is truly evil. Now, even they don't want to be associated with the evil people who are actually doing these things. So you'll have Jews that reject everything we say and they make it an attack on the messenger, even though they know at least that there's at least some truth to the things we're saying. Even if they don't want to explore it entirely and find out that there's a whole lot of truth to the things we're saying, they will still reject us without even looking into these things because they don't want to be viewed guilty by this association. They're Jewish. The people that are behind these things are also Jewish. So even Jews who are out there who are not entirely in the know or who are completely clueless even, they still will reject the things we're saying. Most of them in a very vile and disgusting and in fact threatening and violent nature. But ultimately, even if they were to accept an ounce of responsibility, of collective guilt on behalf of their people, and I haven't seen it yet. Most Jews just deny, and attack the messenger, right? But even if a Jew comes along, I just haven't met him yet, and he were to say, you know what, there's a lot of things that Jewish people are doing, he still doesn't want to be guilty by association. So he will distance himself from that conversation. Again, hence the reason I haven't even had this conversation in all the years and in the thousands of Jews who I've come across who are certainly there, and they certainly have the time to tell slanderous lies, false labels, attack the messenger, childish threats, insults, you name it. But of course they're not going to give an inch. They're not going to admit to anything. Why? It's guilt by association, even if they have never played an active role in it. At least not knowingly, because when they actively and aggressively censor people such as us who are just calmly speaking, giving the other point of view in a non-violent and non-hateful manner, and they lash out at us in a truly vile, threatening, and hateful manner, well, I have to hold them accountable for that. They don't even want to recognize these things, and they're going to blindly defend those that they are guilty by association with. Well, then they are complicit. They are in fact culpable. They are part of the problem. You are either part of the problem or part of the solution, or you're a mindless cog in the middle, no use to yourself or anybody else, other than remaining a mindless cog. But bottom line is, the truth stands alone, above all feelings, above all personal conflicts of interests, personal quagmires, whatever it may be. We have to stand by the truth. It cannot be compromised.